we've done this huge body of research over the last 5 years. We have 10,000 responses from 74 different countries in every possible demographic and every possible industry that tells us that almost every single person wants work to be the thing that inspires them to get out of bed in the morning, but less than a third of us actually work for a leader who inspires us. So what can leaders do? What are the things that leaders need to be doing that excite and engage and inspire their people?
Welcome to Engage Presents. I'm Engage co-founder and president Jake Olson. In this interview series, I ask Engage talent the most common questions we hear from event planners to help you get to know them and their stories in 15 minutes or less. Thanks for listening. Welcome to another episode of Engage Presents. I am Engage president Jake Olson alongside a very impressive guest today. Laura, you are a woman of many accomplishments and talents. You are a Wall Street Journal bestseller, executive coach. You are an executive yourself for your own businesses, even a federal agency. I mean, you have a long list of just accomplishments. So thank you so much for joining us today. That said, just briefly, in your words, describe who you are, the work you do, because again, I could just probably ramble on for hours about all the work you have done.
Sure. So my name's Laura Gassner Otting. All my friends call me LGO. I like to spend my time at the nexus of success and happiness. So I spent 20 years of my career after leaving a presidential appointee in the Clinton White House in executive search. And the first 5 years were for the big marquee company. The next 15 years were for a company that I founded, ran, grew, and eventually sold myself. And in those 20 years, I was responsible for calling the most successful people in the world and recruiting them away on behalf of my clients. And I would call thousands of leaders, and they'd all call me back because despite all that success, they weren't very happy. And I became obsessed with this question of why success doesn't equal happiness and what we can do in our own lives personally and as leaders and as managers to get all of our people to bring everything they are to everything they do.
So you were stealing people. So you probably made some enemies along the way, I imagine.
Yeah, I was the call that nobody wanted their people to get. And so because of it, it was very funny. When I first started speaking, I had a couple speaking bureaus be like, well, we don't want to bring you in because if you speak, everyone will leave. And I'm like, no, if everybody leaves, there's a culture problem in your organization. So let's talk about what your leaders can be doing to, because it turns out like we've done this huge body of research over the last 5 years. We have 10,000 responses from 74 different countries in every possible demographic and every possible industry that tells us that almost every single person wants work to be the thing that inspires them to get out of bed in the morning, but less than a third of us actually work for a leader who inspires us. So what can leaders do? What are the things that leaders need to be doing that excite and engage and inspire their people to get up and do what we need them to do every day? So in fact, I'm not talking people out of leaving. I'm actually helping people connect with what they love about the work that they're doing.
I love that. I love what an interesting study, by the way, too. So you kind of base your work on this concept of limitless. Can you kind of explain what that means to you and kind of how that can be implemented in everyday work?
Sure. So in executive search, we used to listen for like 8 motivating factors that would get anybody excited at any time to consider a new job. And there were things like, am I inspired by the leader? What's the mission of the organization? How broad is the skill set? How deep is the impact? Where's the job located? How much money will I make? How prestigious will it look on my resume, et cetera, et cetera. And when we're like 15, 16, 17 years old, somebody hands us that list and they say, pick a path, pick a major, pick a trade, go for it. And we go, okay. But we don't have a frontal lobe when they hand us that list. And so we make these decisions that are going to affect the very rest of our lives before we actually have the capacity to make a good one. And we don't give ourselves the grace to go back and say, is this the right definition for me? And so a lot of us end up with this one singular myopic definition in one specific order that doesn't work for us. And so we kind of mail it in. And it's not until we sit down and we ask ourselves, what does success really mean to me? What do I actually care about? That we then can do what we want to do because we can't be insatiably hungry for someone else's goals. And that one specific list that we were handed when we were teenagers is somebody else's list. And so I create a framework for my audience members to find themselves their own definition of success. And I like to do it in a way where like, I'm not just throwing a wall of smarts at people because people are like, oh, she's smart. Great. I like to actually give people a framework of how they can say, oh, that's smart. And I can see myself in it. And then they can actually make changes as soon as they leave that event.
That's really, really cool. From your previous answer, you talked about kind of getting out of the bed in the morning, being inspired. You briefly told me before even this interview that you got up this morning at 5 a.m. and ran 6 miles. What inspires you to do that? Because not many people will do that in their life.
It's very funny because I am a leadership speaker, I'm a management speaker, I'm a change speaker, but I'm also considered a motivational speaker. So now I'm going to tell you the big dirty secret is that I think motivation is kind of BS because I'm not getting it. This morning it is 42 degrees. I live in Boston. It's 42
Mhm.
degrees outside and it was spitting rain and it was windy and it was dark. And I had to be at MIT for a keynote at 8 a.m. So that meant I had to get up at like 5 in the morning to get my run. And now I'm training for the Tokyo Marathon in April, which is the last of my 6 major marathons.
Oh
And
my
I didn't want to get up this morning. I didn't have any motivation. I wasn't gonna like dig into the well of magic and like find this motivation. That's nonsense. But I have a friend that I'm training with, and
God.
she was getting up at 5 in the morning to run her 6 miles. And I was not motivated myself, but I was accountable, right? So I'm never going to let her down. And so I was like, all right, if we're going to go, we're going to go, but I got to do it early because I got to get to MIT because they want me there at 9, which means I got to get there at 8 because that's the kind of speaker I am. So we went out and we ran 6 miles. And then I came home, I showered, I changed, I drove 4 miles down the block to a local gig. And I spoke for all the CFOs that are in the Sloan, their business school at MIT.
That is, again, an impressive woman. I don't know what else to say other than that, but I do agree with you with it. Motivation does not get me up in the morning a lot of times to go to the gym. It's definitely having that buddy that's counting on you to be there. So I love the accountability part of that. You did
Absolutely.
you did mention that you do bring inspiration to your talks, you bring humor, you also bring a lot of data backed information, some of it that you've done yourself, which is again impressive. But kind of talk to us about how you collaborate with those who are booking you and kind of with your content, what exactly you're going to speak about on that day to that specific group.
Sure. So we talked about limitless, which a lot of my keynotes are around this idea of finding your own definition of success. The other main body that I speak about right now is Wonderhell, which is my most recent book. And Wonderhell is all about this idea that when you've accomplished something, it's amazing, it's exciting, it's humbling, it's wonderful. And you see a potential that you never thought possible, right? You achieve something you never thought you could achieve. And inside of that achievement is like, oh, there's even more. That's kind of cool. But when you see that bigger potential, you also start to experience stress and uncertainty and anxiety and doubt and imposter syndrome. And it's actually kind of hell, right? It's wonder hell. And I wrote the book Wonder Hell pretty much like an amusement park. So there's 3 towns of Wonder Hell. There's Imposter Town, Doubtsville, and Burnout City. And each of those towns has 5 rides. And each of those rides evokes an emotion that your audience members, that your team, that your company may be feeling, right? So there's like the roller coaster when everything's uncertain. There's the gravitron when the bottom drops out. There's the whack-a-mole if people are like so busy, but they're not getting anything done. And what I do is I give my clients the list of the 15 rides of Wonderhell. Each of those rides has 2 to 3 interviews with Olympic medalists, startup unicorns, CEOs, entrepreneurs, executives, thinkers, creatives, everyday people like you and I. And I say, pick the rides. And let's also make sure we have the right diversity of stories. So if it's an all women's group, they're all women. If it's a young entrepreneur group, I make sure to throw a young entrepreneur in there, right? Like I try to make sure that we have the right representation that so the audience can see themselves in the story. So the Wonderhell keynote is completely bespoke to that individual client based on what that individual client wants their audience to think, feel, or do differently after they walk out of the room.
That is really cool. You do not call that amusement park the happiest place on earth, right?
It is not the happiest place on earth, but here's the thing, like, wonder how we think of this moment where we are so burdened by the vision of our own potential that we don't even know what to do. And so many of my clients say, I just want my people to do something. Right. And so what I love about the Wonder Health talk is that I can say, we're going to take them in the super fun, tour of this amusement park. They're going to see themselves in the stories of the interviews that I actually did with these people. So it's not just me telling you, I read a book about so-and-so, but like I interviewed Alan Mulally, who saved Ford, and here's what he said. I interviewed Anne McFerrin, who created a fake, glamorous lash business that sells $50 million of lashes a year. I interviewed, the first female NFL coach in ever. And
Mhm.
like I can talk about what I learned, but then each one of those stories also has a research study or data or some scientific something that backs it up as well. And so it's like it's I like drip in little bits so that the people who are data nerds get the data, the people who like the stories get the stories, the people who want the oh wow, I've never heard that before get that, and they all leave with something.
Very cool. The last question, and honestly, my answer for you, if I was going to answer this question for you, would be running a marathon, let alone six in 1 year, because that's crazy to me. But what is, through all your accolades, what are you most impressed with? What are you most proud of what you've done in your career?
Well, I'll tell you the most recent accolade if I could, so I don't know, right? I mean, I've done a lot of like, well, why not kind of things. Ending up in the White House was pretty fun,
Mhm.
but I have just recently been named an official contributor to the ABC network. So I am an official contributor to ABC and Good Morning America's first call for anything workforce, jobs, or career related. And that's pretty fun because I was on Good Morning America first when Limitless came out, and I've been on about 6 times since. And I just kind of said, what about me? It's got to be someone. I've got 30 years of experience. What about me? And I think that's pretty emblematic of what I bring to my audiences, which is like, you have all of this great stuff. What about you?
I love that. Well, if I can, LGO, thank you so much for taking the
Absolutely.
time to be with us today. We really appreciate it. We know you're busy. You're again extremely impressive and a heck of a speaker and presenter. So thank you so much for being willing to work with us, for taking the time today. If you want to learn more about Laura, again, you can find her everywhere. Turn on ABC in the morning, but more importantly, visit letsengage.com, check out her profile, and please book her there. So thank you so much for being with us today again, Laura, and be good and stay tuned for more Engage Presents.
Thanks, Jake.